Hi, and welcome to our virtual Justice on the Block Legal Information Clinic. This clinic is part of the virtual series known as Know Your Child's Education Rights. To help us learn more about what kinds of services you can ask for from your school if you think your child has a disability, we have Stephanie Johnson, Senior Attorney of the Tallahassee Office of Legal Services of North Florida, and Cheryl Sattler, Education Advocate with Legal Services of North Florida. Before we get started, I just wanted to share that this video provides legal information and should not be considered legal advice. This video does not create an attorney-client relationship or substitute legal advice you've been given. You may have defenses that we haven't discussed here, so seeking out an attorney or legal help is advisable. For more information about legal services in North Florida or other information, go to lsnf.org or call 850-385-9007. All right, thank you both for joining us. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, Charlotte. So in this segment of our educational series, we're going to give you an introduction to special education services. So Cheryl, what is special education?
Oh my gosh. We could probably talk for hours about what it is and what it isn't, but the short answer is special education is where a child is identified as having one of a series of specific disabilities, and that disability impacts their education, then they are entitled to what we call special education services, which are services to help that child achieve at the same level as any other child without a disability.
And how does a parent know if their child needs special education?
I'm sorry, Stephanie, I missed part of that question.
How does a parent know if their child needs special education services?
That is the question of the hour. So what typically happens, well, first of all, the parent can't make that decision. The parent can ask for the school to help them make that decision. And so what happens is that a parent may notice their child is really not learning in school. They're not reading when you get to the third or fourth grade. They're not able to do things that their teacher says that they're supposed to be able to do. You know, when they're littler, it might be holding a pencil correctly or writing their letters out. So something happens that you think, you know, what's going on here? And usually the parent will try, you know, okay, well, maybe I can teach my kid to read. Or maybe the parent will ask the teacher, well, what else can you do for my child? And when you get to the point where everybody's kind of, what's going on? And this isn't working. That's when you start asking questions like, is there something else we need to have disability? Do they need special services?
Okay, so go ahead.
I think, well, I was just going to say that right now with COVID and, you know, about 2/3 of kids are still learning online. We didn't take state tests in the spring. You know, I know that there are other kinds of ways that schools are measuring progress, but a lot of kids have a hard time learning online. I mean, I can't imagine being a kindergartner learning how to recognize my letters on a screen. I mean, you know, there was Sesame Street and all, but this is not Sesame Street. So I think right now a lot of parents may be really worried about what's going on with their kids and whether they're falling behind. And some of those kids may need special education, but the first step for a parent should be to ask the school to make sure that they understand what's going on with their child. How are they performing? How are they learning or not learning? And then what else can the school offer them? Because special education is really only for a very small group of students, maybe 8%, maybe 10%, maybe 5%, depends on who you ask, but you know, not everybody.
So if a child is falling behind due to the remote learning, that wouldn't necessarily mean that that child needs special education services?
It would not. It would, however, mean that that child, for example, is eligible for a reading scholarship to help them with reading. And I know that right now, I just was watching the State Board of Education, which met today, and they're running the numbers to see, can we help identify these kids who are falling behind and make sure that they are getting some support to catch them up. So it's a very different thing just to, fall behind a little bit or struggle with an idea, or maybe not understand how a particular kind of math works. I would be in special ed if that were the only criteria. But no, there's lots of stuff going on right now. It's a really confusing time.
And so how would a school district determine if a child needed special education services?
So there's really two ways. And it's not just schools, by the way, even kids who go to VPK or childcare, any kind of early program. So the government, the state, the school district has a responsibility to find those kids, to look for those kids. And they call that child find, which is probably the only phrase in all of government that actually makes sense, right? You're supposed to find the child. But as with everything, government is not perfect. And so let me go back to that. If the government thinks that your child needs to be evaluated for special education, they have to ask. They can't just test your child. They have to say, Ms. Johnson, we think that your son, because of X, Y, and Z, might have something that we need to figure out. Would you mind if we gave him a series of tests? The other way that you can get to that same point is if you're the parent or someone acting as a parent, so guardian or a foster parent, maybe even a grandparent. The statute's very broad in who can act as a parent for this. You can go to the school and in writing, it's really important, in writing with a date, ask the school to evaluate your child. And you don't have to put lots of stuff in that request. Think of it as a field trip slip, right? Just your child's name and your child is struggling and you would like him or her evaluated. They then have to act. They have to do it. And there's a clock that starts ticking. I think it's 60 days. So once a parent is that concerned, child find is out the window. They failed to find that child. So we're gonna find and point out the child and say, look, here, this one, maybe he needs your help. So there's definitely two sides.
And what actually happens within that 60 days and what happens after that?
Right. So in that 60 days, the school district has to decide all of the tests that should be given to a child. And so because special education is really broad, and it goes everything from speech, so if your child stutters, all the way to, we had a client, Stephanie, you'll remember, who was in a wheelchair, who couldn't feed himself and couldn't go to the bathroom by himself and had real mental delays. So it's just this huge continuum. So they have to give all these tests at the same time. They have to test for anything that can be going on, because you don't want to be going back and saying, oh, we'll go to this doctor. Oh, we'll go to that doctor. So they're making sure the tests happen. They're getting all of those results together. And then they have a meeting. And this is a meeting that must involve the parent. So you would get a letter. It's a really horrible letter usually that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it says, please come sit down with us and let's talk about what these test results show. And that is called a determination meeting, another really sexy term. And at that meeting, the parent, the school, sometimes teachers, there's a whole group of people who sit together and say, this is what we think. This is a child who qualifies, or this is not a child who qualifies. And then that sort of sets the path for going forward. It's a really important meeting. It's not forever. If the school disagrees that a child needs help and things continue to go downhill, you can go back. You can say, no, I think you missed something. If the school disagrees that this is a special education issue, it's also an opportunity for you as a parent to say, all right, great. So you don't think my child needs special education? That's fine, but he can't read. So how are you going to fix it? So, it starts a long kind of convoluted process. But the whole idea behind special education is that the parent is part of the team that makes decisions about a child. And that's because it's your child and you know your child best. And so you are the expert on your child. The school might be the expert on how to teach kids to read, or what school uniform should look like, or how much pizza a child should have in school lunch, but you are the expert on your child.
Okay. And this is a topic for another session, but if the school and the parents completely disagree on whether the child is eligible, the parents also have a right to appeal that decision.
Absolutely. Let me
go
go back for a second. I want to mention that sometimes a child needs special education, not for academics. Sometimes they need special education because of behavior. And, schools have lots of rules. You're supposed to stand in a straight line. You're supposed to do this and do that and do it this time and not that time. And so some students have what we call emotional or behavioral disabilities. There are things in their brain that don't help them comply with those rules. And so you end up getting in trouble all the time. So that's another warning sign. If a school is sending your child home a lot, if a child is getting suspended, certainly expelled, but you just watch those things. You go, all right, look, my child's getting in trouble for the same thing over and over and over again. Let me ask some questions.
Okay, and I know we're getting close to our time limit, but what are the benefits and the disadvantages to being a special education child?
Oh, Stephanie, that's another one we could talk for a long time about. So on the upside, being in special education, and let me just say that special education isn't one thing. It can be all sorts of things. It could be an hour of speech therapy a month, or it could be I'm in a classroom with only 3 other kids. So the advantage is that you've got a whole group of people who are legally responsible for looking at this child, for making sure that there's a plan for this child, that there are goals and that those goals are met, and that there are resources that are dedicated to doing those things. The downside is that, and this, depends on the school, depends on the teacher, depends on lots of stuff, is that sometimes when children are labeled as special education children, the expectations for them are lower. And that's something that, it might be totally appropriate for a school to have lower expectations for a child with traumatic brain injury. Okay? They were in a huge car accident, parts of their brain don't connect. I think you have different expectations for that kid. But if you've got a child who, has some specific learning disability, maybe they're dyslexic, they see backwards words or numbers, dysgraphic, there's no reason for that. And so as a parent, you also have to really guard against having your child not only treated differently, but maybe given less, because you want your child, the whole purpose of special education is to put your child on a level playing field, right? To make sure that they, if they're short and can't see over the fence, that they stand on that milk crate so that every child can see over the fence. And your child needs a milk crate, fine, we'll give him a milk crate. But it's a real balance. And that's unfortunate but it's true. And I'm glad that you asked.
Well, and that's a great analogy. So, and we realize that this is a huge issue and we only had a couple minutes to talk to you about it. But I think that was great. Cheryl, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, we actually have some resources that we wanted to offer parents. And so the state of Florida, we're in Florida, although, if you happen to be watching this in another state, these are nothing about that we've said today is state specific, except for the reading scholarships, but we'll just leave that aside. So there are parent resource groups funded by the federal government all over the country. And their only job is to help parents understand this stuff. And so what we'd like to give you is a couple of things, a guidebook for Florida on how special ed works here, but also, you know, if you're anywhere, seriously, these people get paid to help you. So let them help you. Reach out and ask your questions. And a lot of them have great websites. They will run local trainings. And they're really friendly people, and they're used to talking to parents. So they use real words instead of the crazy education words that we get all wound up in.
So we provided you those links. And so we've got several links for you to look at. So that's the end of our session this time. We invite you to next month's talk when we're going to be talking about Baker Acts, and specifically Baker Acts that happen during school. And so please join us next month, same, I think it's February 10th, same time. And that's it. Thank you.